It's rough lately. You're president of a club that now has a decent, suddenly you're flexing everybody.
No, because my other club is.
Where am I? Okay, well, apparently I am not in Zoom anymore, but that's still working. Okay. Jason, you let me know when you want me to start.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So welcome, everybody. For those of you who do not know me, I am Catherine Bramall, chair of the history department, and did not organize this. It was actually Dr. McDonald, but he was worried his voice would give out halfway through the introduction because Dr. Huping Ling is so prolific. The last CV I had of hers was from 2018, and it was 31 pages long. And you might think, oh, big font. No, it's literally 31 pages long. And so he was quite rightly worried. Dr. Ling is a distinguished emerita faculty here at Truman. She retired just a couple of years ago now, but earned her PhD in 1991 at Miami University in Ohio, and I think came here pretty much straight from there.
Right.
So from 1991 to 2021? Yeah, so really long time. And in that time, she taught dozens of classes and thousands of students, but also wrote prolifically. So this CV that I'm holding here, as I say, is 5 years old now, and on her books list, it says authored, edited 28 books since 1998. And she's done 4 or 5 more since then. Yeah. So you can imagine the wealth of knowledge that Dr. Ling brings to essentially everything she does. But what she's going to be doing for us here today is talking about her two most recent books, and much of her scholarly career has focused on Asian immigration and then Asian American experience within the United States, and particularly in the Midwest. And that's what her two other, certainly the, what is it, Chinese in the Heartland.
And Asian American history. Yeah.
Right. And so that's what she's going to be talking to us about today. And she has books, if you are interested, that she is happy to sign for you. But I do know that in addition to that, she has had projects that were much more focused also on Chinese history. And so in particular, one of the things that she has been working on is a history of her father in China during the era of the Cultural Revolution, and the kinds of the extensive history, so not just in the 30s and 40s, but the kinds of things that happened to people, in particular her father, during that period. And a lot of that work was done as she was distinguished research fellows at various places, including Stanford University. She was the Chengjiang Scholar through the Chinese Ministry of Education. She is Distinguished Honorary Professor at Lishu University in Zhejiang. She has taught at the Institute of Overseas Chinese Studies in Jinan University in Guangzhou. She has served as both a mentor and an editor for many scholars over the years, both in journals and then in edited series. And so I honestly could go on for many pages, but I think you would much rather hear from Dr. Ling herself. And so I'm really glad she is here and back, and I hope that you enjoy her talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine, for your very generous introduction. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for the exceptionally generous introduction you just provided. It is with immense honor that I accept the invitation to speak at the Kohlenberg-Towne lecture series, which is one of the most prestigious platforms at Truman. I'd also like to extend my sincere thanks to all my esteemed colleagues. Some of them here you can see from the History Department, the Historical Society, and the Phi Alpha Theta for their sponsorship of this lecture. And also a special note of appreciation to Professor Jason McDonald for his meticulous and flawless coordination of the event. I'm deeply thankful to Truman State University, where I devoted 30 years of my career until my retirement 2 years ago. I'm really grateful to the president here, our dean, Elizabeth Clark, who told me who couldn't make it, and our chair, Catherine Bramall, and a number of other colleagues, friends, for their enthusiastic support and encouragement. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the Asian American community, especially the Asian and the Asian American faculty members at Truman, as well as the broader Asian American communities in St. Louis, Chicago, the Midwest, and beyond, because many of them have been interviewed by me. Their struggles, success, and unwavering support have served as an immense source of inspiration for my tireless research and writing over the past 4 decades. And also I'd like to make special recognition to Jake Spark, the manager of the Truman Bookstore, who is supposed to be here to bring the book for people who are interested in purchase and sign following the lecture. I'm also profoundly grateful to my family, who might be here sometime later, whose unwavering love, sacrifices, and unwavering support have transformed my academic journey into a very joyful and fulfilling experience. And lastly, but not least, my heartfelt thanks to everyone who joined us either in person here or online to attend this lecture. Your presence is greatly appreciated. So now let me switch to PowerPoint. Here's a little brief, my CV, just a few lines. Okay. In case you're interested in that, I know we have a lot of aspiring young scholars here. If you have a book manuscript or other works you want to help, I'm here ready for you. I'm currently serving as book series editor at Rutgers University Press. The series called Asian American Studies Today. We welcome all the fine manuscripts. And you can contact me if you want further interaction. My Truman email is listed there. And the bottom is my personal website. Okay, here I want to just have this outline of my lecture to stay focused. I'll try to make my lecture within 40 to 50 minutes. And here, first, I'm going to have a brief introduction on the history of Chinese migration. Yeah, because for most of us here, I don't assume everyone has read a lot, right, on Asian American or Chinese American. So I have a brief history then move on to the migration, Chinese migration to Midwest. But I'm going to focus my sharing today on Asian American heartland story. Okay, so-called heartland. We know that where we are is heartland, but the definition can be very narrow or very broad. Okay, but census heartlands corresponds to 12 states, but some scholars count as many as 35 states. All the states who are not on the West Coast and East Coast are counted as heartland or Mid America. Okay, so that's a really broad area. Then finally, I'm going to the number 4, focus on convergence and divergence. What is that? Because I have been often asked by people, say, why do people come to Midwest? Okay, what is the difference when you compare to Asian Americans in the Midwest and their counterparts on both coasts? Okay, so I'm going to focus on that. Then finally, we come to the conclusion. Then we will have question and answers, and followed by book signing. Okay, here is our brief history. In 1849, from 1849 to 1882. So this is the period, roughly there are about 370,000 Chinese came to the United States, mostly in California, right, during the gold rush. So just to give you a comparison, during the same time period, about 1 million Europeans came. So Chinese is probably a small fraction of the larger immigration wave. But in the 1870s, the strong anti-Chinese sentiment occurred on the West Coast, okay, because the Chinese were allegedly accused as they were strikers. They were cheap laborers. They took away from Euro-Americans, so they were targeted. And in 1882, Congress passed a law called the Chinese Exclusion Law, which banned all the Chinese from coming for 10 years. Okay, all the Chinese except some special groups like tourists, students, scholars, diplomats. So Chinese were banned from coming to the country. Until 1943, the Chinese Exclusion Act was expelled. When that happened, because during World War II, Chinese joined the alliance, and the Chinese behavior in the so-called China-Burma theater, and the Chinese American participation during the war effort in the country, okay, changed the country's mood. So the Chinese suddenly became the hero, okay, contrast with the Japanese. So that forced, okay, there's all the different impulse forced the Congress to repeal this Chinese Exclusion Law. And in 1965, there's another major law. It's called the Chinese Immigration, it's called Immigration and Naturalization Act. And this act has been viewed as a it's a landmark event, which ushered a large number of new immigrants from Asia, from Southeast Europe, and largely from South America. Okay. So which greatly changed the landscape of Asian American. And Asian American population increased in their previous so-called bachelor society. Many of them have their wife joined them, so they reached a more family balanced society. And by the recent census in 2020s, it counted 19 million Asian Americans, which is 7.2% of the total population, total U.S. population, among which 25% of them Chinese. It's like every one of the 4 Asian Americans, there's one. Okay. So that is our folks here. So in 1870s, when this anti-Chinese wave on the West Coast appeared, many Chinese, because there's a slogan that time, called the Chinese must go. Right? So many Chinese returned, but many more also dispersed throughout the country. Some went to south, some east, many came to the west, okay? Either by train, by Chicago, then from there, some came to St. Louis. So here, since we're talking about Midwest story, I'm going to focus on the two cities, two major metropolises in Midwest. One is St. Louis, the other Chicago. So the tales of these two cities, there are lots of similarities, but at the same time, there are also differences. Okay. The similarity is that both the cities were port cities. While Chicago is the center of the land, rail, water, and the later air transportation of the country. While St. Louis is at it's a confluence of two rivers, right? Mississippi, go east, west, and Mississippi, north, south. Okay. So both of the port cities that provide accessibility for those new immigrants, but most of them are remigrants who might arrive in mostly in San Francisco first, then further came to Chicago or St. Louis. And the similarities between these two cities, okay, in addition to the all port cities, and before 1965, you know, there's a Immigration and Naturalization Act I mentioned earlier. The community structure in those cities, and like in many other communities where the Chinese concentrate, is so-called Chinatown. Okay. They have this old commercial residential settlement, commonly known as Chinatown. And they have a community organizations called Anliang, okay, which is prominent in both St. Louis and Chicago. But these two cities, after 1965, in terms of the community structure, there's some difference. Okay, in St. Louis, I coined this term, cultural community, in my book, Chinese in St. Louis, which was published in 2004. Okay, so so-called cultural community is the community is not identifiable because after 1966, the Chinatown, which was known as Pop Alley in St. Louis, was leveled for the Bush Stadium. So you don't see the Chinatown anymore. However, the census counted the Chinese up to the 1990 to 2000. There are about 10,000 of them. So where are they? They're dispersed in the suburbs, but they gather together during the weekend and the special Chinese holidays. Okay, so I identified this community form, and I call it cultural community. In Chicago, because it's a larger city and there's more diversity, so I use the term tripartite divide, okay, to describe the community structure, where you have South Chinatown, which is a traditional community, Chinese community, and the North Chinatown, which was revitalized up in 1970s because newcomers from Southeast Asia, mostly war refugees. And in the suburban counties, there are also a similar cultural community. Okay, in the pre-1965, the Chinatown, mostly they are located in the downtown area, okay? And their economy, either in San Francisco or or Midwest, in St. Louis or in Chicago, mostly concentrated in these three, people call them three pillars of Asian economy or Chinese economy. One's laundry, the second one's grocery store, the third one is restaurant. And all the Chinatowns also portrayed by the media as crime rate, where you have town wars, there's prostitution, or where people might be mugged. Some local children, I read that they would taunt each other, dare them. Do you want to go to Hop Alley? Can you bring me to Hop Alley? Okay, so those are the stereotypes. And those two cities, Chinese communities, I have them portrayed in those 5 books I'm here. Okay, on the far left, this is the newest one, Chinese Americans in the Heartland, which focus on the both Chicago and the St. Louis. And on the center top, Chinese Chicago, which was published in 2012, focus on the Chicago. The center and bottom, Chinese in St. Louis, published in 2004. Then this other two, the top one was pictorial book, published in 2007. It's also about Chinese in St. Louis, but it's mainly historical photographs. The bottom one was a collection of oral history interviews. My students in my Asian American seminars and myself, we conducted over 300 oral history interviews, but 54 cases selected there. They are interviews from women, so it's a history of Asian women on their immigration, family, and work. So where is the Chinatown in St. Louis? So this is a picture, historical map drawn in the 1890s. And we enlarged it here in this dark shaded area. That's where the old St. Louis Chinatown, or so-called Hop Alley, was located in. And we further enlarge it. It is a pretty small area. Okay, it's between here's in this shaded area, okay, light gray shade, between 7th and 8th Street, and the north-south between Market Street and Walnut Street. Pay attention to the Chestnut Street, okay, the very northeast. That's where the African American community was. Okay, so here we can see, there's ethnic communities. Oftentimes they border each other, might overlap things like Little Italy and Chinatown in New York. Also, they share some district or areas. And this is a map of geographical situation of Chinese community in Chicago. The dark area here. This is the so-called South Chinatown. It was founded in 1912, still surviving and thriving today. So if you go to Chicago, I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. But the tourists always go there. That is spot for the tourism. And the part of the reason why it's still thriving is because the city practice, it's combined tourism and the local economy. And that's how it could continuously being prosperous and also enlarging. And in the north, here, this even smaller dot is Argyle Street. This is so-called the Small Saigon, the nickname, and also called New China. It used to be the Jewish community, but in 1970s it was revitalized because influx of Southeast Asian, Vietnamese, and other Indo-China Peninsula refugees. So this South Chinatown already was overcrowded, could not further accommodate them. So they moved to Argyle Street and revitalized that area. Nowadays, if you see, what is the difference between North Chinatown and South Chinatown? South Chinatown is more Chinese. Okay, the population is mostly Chinese. Where North Chinatown is more ethnic Chinese. Okay, the Chinese, ethnic Chinese who came or who run from the war in Vietnam and later on Cambodian and Laos. So it's more Southeast Asia ethnic Chinese community. Well, in here, this dot here, a couple of dots, in Evanston, Stokes counties, you have these scattered Chinese communities, settlements, and I call them cultural communities. So that's the situation in Chicago. So now let's back to their livelihood. Okay. We mentioned the laundry was their primary killer or their economic sector. And here I'm going to tell you the story of Samoa laundry. That's featured in my Chinese Centuries book. Samoa laundry was run by the two elderly brothers. At the time, in 1986, the two brothers finally all passed away. But they all worked till their 80s. And they came to the country in 1922 in St. Louis. Initially, they arrived in San Francisco. They learned their laundry business there. Then they went to Chicago, but they didn't like the cold weather there because they came from Guangdong province, which is a subtropical area. So they came to St. Louis to join their uncle who was running the laundry. It's called Samoa. And they inherited laundry, and the older elderly brother was also known as Samoa. Even his real name was Huping, and his younger brother, we can see it in the later picture here. And they worked for over 40 years, day in and out, from morning to the very late in the evening. And in 1986, okay, what happened? Sorry. Okay, let me here inject this. Okay, how could this Samoa laundry was so popular? And in 1950s, when this coin-operated laundry became popular, and all the Chinese manual hand laundry all closed. But this was still the only one surviving there and also doing pretty well. The major reason is they're cheap. Okay, you can see here, this is the list of their price. If you can't read, I can, on the top say washing a man's shirt, 25 cents. Woman's shirt, 35 cents. It will be more expensive. Okay. So this is the price they had in the 60s, but they maintained this low price. Okay. So the major reason is that they're very cheap. Another reason is that a lot of their clientele believe hand wash laundry can make the material fabric last longer, right? And also they look better than machine wash. Okay. So those are the reasons the Chinese, why they all concentrated in this business, because it's cheap. To start a laundry business, what you need is just a scrubbing board and a piece of soap, okay, to start it. And here in their laundry, you can, from the picture, we can tell they have this in the back of that, in the previous picture. So this is a dryer. That dryer was 100 years old. And in there, here you can see it's crowded. In the front of the laundry, you can see that's where they receive their customers and have their parcels, the dirty laundry is sorted. Then in the back, oftentimes you have their large washing machine and dryers, and also their living quarters. Okay, so this is kind of a living condition, how they maintain the business and live on the very, very, very minimal margin to survive. While in Chicago, I want to focus on their grocery business, because Chicago is known as a distribution center, not only for beef or corn, all of this, but Chinese in Chicago, the grocery business in Chicago also served as both retailing and wholesale. And other Chinese business in the nearby cities or states would go there to get their wholesale stock and sell in their local area. And all of these grocery stores also served as a bank, a local bank, because the Chinese were excluded from, because they're limited English speaking ability. They usually, how they send their money, they save to home is through the Chinese grocery store. Okay, they do their remittance there. So those grocery stores served as a bank or sometimes a hotel. You know, if you have friends or the other dignitarian came to the town, might stay there. And also there's a variety of the traveling stores serve the Chinese laundry's need, because the laundry are more scattered around the town. And another feature of the Chinese business in Chicago is that Chinese in Chicago is known as the pioneers of Chinese fine dining. Usually people would think, okay, that happened probably in San Francisco or New York. But actually, the pioneer restaurateurs in Chicago, they did very well, and they set up this trend. Okay, and here I have the example. This gentleman here, his name is Ching Fang Boy, and his wife. You can see his wife dressed in the Victoria dress, Western style. So this man came to the country at the age of 18. Then he learned English, and he also was known to speak German, and he could ride horse. He joined those exclusive clubs, and he was doing very well. You know, the restaurant he owned was extravagant, okay, decorated with expensive furniture and other equipment. And the Chinese restaurant in Chicago also, even in the turn of the century, the 1880s, 1890s, 1910s, they're very large. Okay. They could have 75 employees. Even in today, that size, the restaurant in that size is pretty, very large. Okay. And in 1893, the World Fair happened in Chicago. So the Chinese restaurant also did their promotion there. They sold Chinese food, and which was Chinese coffee. They set up restaurants called Chinese coffee. Okay. So those are the examples, the Chinese, how they survived in those locales. And in post 1965, okay, this is what I said earlier. In Chicago, we have a tripartite divide. So South Chinatown, North Chinatown, and the suburban cultural community. And this map again here. And here the picture on the left is the gate, okay, gate of the South Chinatown. I guess it looks very familiar to many of you. And picture on the right is what I took in Argyle Street. And you can see those characters on the side there. The grocery store has multi-language, Chinese, Vietnamese, and English. Okay, so this is that it's an ethnic Chinese community there. And in the cultural community, which is scattered, but many of them concentrate or they gathered around this mall, okay, in Westmont. Okay, there are some Chinese language school or clinics and office of accountancy or doctors, okay, also gathered. And in St. Louis, okay, now back to St. Louis, after 1960s, the community structure I said was called the cultural community. Why I call it cultural community? Because mainly the community is unlike the earlier Chinatown. You can physically identify there's a Chinatown, right? There's a physical buildings, structures, streets, there's a location. But the post-1965 Chinese community in St. Louis is very hard to find a physical landmark. But however, there's a way to identify them. That's through this cultural space or social space. Okay, cultural space. They are presented in Chinese language schools, our Chinese church, our community organizations, or in the cultural activities. For example, they have a celebration of the Chinese New Year, but the largest celebrations in mid-May every year. We have it. They call it the Chinese Culture Day in 2 days in mid-May. And this picture indicates it really is the Chinese language school really is the infrastructure of the Chinese community. Because during the weekend, people gathered there. When their children were taking Chinese language classes, the parents would there communicate, right, exchange information or attend. There's other classes also organized for grown-ups. And on the right, this picture is a mock wedding in St. Louis during the cultural days. So you have various cultural activities like cooking, kung fu, or Chinese acrobats, demonstration of Chinese calligraphy, and other things. And this year, I used to go there every year, but not recent years, partly because of COVID. But this year, I made a point to attend it. And they had this mock wedding, and that's me there. I speak not for Friday, just want to have a picture to demonstrate what is a cultural day. What do they do there? Okay. The most glamorous you can see is their dragon dance that attract a lot of local as well as visitors from far away. Okay, so now I'm going to come to my comparison of what is the similarities between Chinese in the Midwest and their counterparts on the coast. Okay. So convergence here I mean the similarities. What is similar? Okay. Divergence I mean the differences. So here I use them the color coded. Similarities or convergence I use the red color. And divergence or differences or nuances, I use the blue color. So you can see that there's maybe more nuances in Midwest for the Asian American community than that on the coast. I use the 5 indicators here myself. Use these indicators to demonstrate how different, how similar they are. Okay. The first one is locality. Okay, both the Chinese or Asian community on West Coast and the Midwest, they are in entry ports. They are located in entry ports that provide easy access for new immigrants, right? Either they are international immigrants or migrants, for remigration from one area to another, or from East Coast to Midwest, or from Chicago for the regional migration, from Chicago to St. Louis. Okay, so here the blue, that's the difference. On the coastal cities, you receive, those communities receive international migration. Immigrants whose standing place or origin places, usually foreign countries. Well, in the Midwest, those entry ports are more for internal or regional migration. Okay. And in terms of demographics, and the picture here is also very different. You don't see the red or blue color, right? In the West Coast or East Coast, in the Asian communities, the majority of the members there are working class. Okay, 60% of the residents were working class, according to the census. Versus in Midwest, 80% of the Asian American population were either professionals or self-employed small business owners. So that is the difference. And because of these different demographic differences, we consider further how the community is structured differently. In pre-1960s, you can see the similarities. Either on coast or in the Midwest, their community formation is Chinatown, okay, or so-called ghettos, in-town ethnic enclaves. But in the post-1960s, on the coast area, they have other forms of communities, so-called suburban Chinatown. Okay, in LA, for example, an area like Monterey Park City, which by scholars dubbed as suburban Chinatown. While New York was also identified by some other scholars as a global city because of the diversity of the residents there, not just the Chinese. You have Koreans, maybe Croatians, and others mingled in the area. But in St. Louis or Chicago, we see the cultural community. Why they have this structural differences? Because the next indicator, their connectedness with the local economy. While on the East Coast or West Coast, they mainly depend on ethnic networks, either from their labor recruitment, their capital accumulation, their management, procurement of their goods. They largely depend on their ethnic networks. But in the Midwest, the Chinese economy have to depend on both ethnic network as well as main society population. Okay. So that's the difference. And their interaction, or you can say the reception of the local society, the larger society. Many people I interviewed, or my students we interviewed, they agreed. Okay, so this area, people are more friendly. Of course, the lower cost of living here, especially in the real estate. And they have a better social economic integration to the larger society. So those are the major points I want to summarize here. Okay, and finally, there's a conclusion. Okay, those Asian American community, especially Chinese immigrant community, contribute historically, both historically and in present time, disproportionately to their population, to the economy, to the local economy. Okay, for example, the historical examples, Chinese provided 60% of the laundry service in St. Louis, where their population was only 0.1%. 0.1%. That is their population out of 300,000 in St. Louis City. The population is 300,000, but about 300 Chinese. Another, to our historical society colleagues here, when we learn the local history is or individual history, when you do interview, they're not just individual or local, but they are reflection, regional, national, and global history. Okay? Very reflective. When we study the local history, it provides nuances about the broader context of national history. And the history provides us with guidance, clues for present challenges and difficulties. Okay. So this is, I think I mentioned within 45 minutes. Here, this book, I took a time, but I don't know, or bookstore, something else not here, actually, that's the point. So these are the one I already said earlier, Chinese Americans in the Heartland, focus on St. Louis and Chicago. The other one is general Asian American history. And here I have some book I'm going to give away. Okay. There are some copies in the middle, which is the Voice of the Heart. That is the interview, oral history interviews of Asian American women in the Midwest area in English. And others, the Chinese on the left is Chinese in Chicago. I translated into Chinese, published in China in 2015. On the right is the Encyclopedia of Asian American History and Culture, published in 2010, and the translation in Chinese published in 2016. Those are in Chinese language. Right now, I think we are open for questions.
So you had indicated that historically there are these three economic pillars. Are those pillars still the same today, or have they shifted at all? And are they pillars that uphold sort of first generation Asian immigrants, or the children of first generation as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question, but also very broad. Okay?
Yeah.
It encompasses almost everything.
Yeah.
They are historical pillars, but today they are still very present. You can still see they are still the major phases of Asian American economy, either in Midwest or on the coast. So when you go to the large concentration of Asian community, you will see those restaurants, right? Grocery stores, or maybe in the different varieties. Some like grocery store on the West Coast, you notice 99 Cents, which is a large chain supermarket. But anyway, it is still evolved from the initial grocery store. Laundry largely disappeared, replaced by dry cleaning. Okay. And the stores, related to your question, are they mainly for first generation? Yes, mostly for first generation or maybe second generation. But the tendency is that the younger generation, especially the American born, are less and less interested in inherit their family business. So many of the business, once their proprietors aged retired, probably have to close it. Okay. But right now there are also the effort to train the younger generation to return to the business, or it does not have to be, generically biologically related. But the younger generation, there are the new styles of, there is quite a few that's Asian popular chef, right? For example, when I blacked out, there's one in Alla Lee, the Korean chef. So, they make they're popular, they're like rock star, okay? But it also evolved from the restaurant business. So, any other questions? Oh, yeah, Derek?
Yeah. Did you come across any any testimonies about kind of the relationship between the United States government and Chinese government having an impact on the experience of immigrants?
Yes, I have done that, because today we have limited time, so I mainly focus on the two locale. But when you look closely, the politics within the Asian community, in the case of the Chinese community, is very much influenced by, for example, Chinese mainland government versus the Taiwan, government in Taiwan. Within the Chinese community, you can see a lot of divides, sub-divides, many of them. Just in St. Louis, there are 40 to 50 community organizations, and they compete for audience whenever they have those events. Right? Some are pro-mainlanders, some are pro-Chinese, Taiwanese Chinese, and they jointly in the larger events like Chinese Cultural Days, they work collectively. But during the weekends, I think they still associate within their subgroups. Okay, so you have the organization of some called Formosa Association or Taiwanese Lawyers Associations. They tend to have this divides. But however, it's no open conflict. You don't see that. But certainly there's, they compete for attention, for audience, and of course, resource. Very good question.
I'd be interested if you could comment on how dialect or language differences influence migration, and to some extent how that might have also influenced tensions between older generations and younger generations.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. It's also a very good question because this all the cultural diversities, applies to every ethnic group. It was more so to Chinese because Chinese, we know it has numerous dialects, countless, so we don't know exactly. But there are 7 large major dialects, the groups. The Chinese, the older immigrants mainly came from southern China, from the provinces called the Guangdong province, where people speak the local dialect, the Cantonese. But even the Cantonese, there are also many diversities. Okay? Among the Cantonese, the early immigrants, most of them are Huaishan. Huaishan is the area where the early immigrants came. So this Huaishan was regarded as a standard Mandarin, standard Chinese before. Right? So the larger, you can see the older immigrants prior to 1965, their dominant language was this Cantonese. But after 1965, as more immigrants came, also their socioeconomic, demographic background also more diverse. So you can have, there's more Chinese came from not southern cities, but from major capital cities. And they speak standard Chinese dialect, well, I don't call dialect, Mandarin. Some of you are here, you're learning Mandarin or Putonghua. But also a lot of people speaking Shanghainese or other popular dialects. For example, Fuzhounese, which is dialect in Fujian, among the Chinese in New York, and many of them speak that. And even in Kirksville, if you look at the restaurant tours here, probably you'll find a majority of them from Fujian province and from actually Fuzhou area, and more likely from the places called the Changde. And many of them actually initially came as undocumented immigrants, but after some years, they paid debts and hired a lawyer, they had their legal status, and they migrated or remigrated, that's what I said here, from New York to Midwest, because here it's cheaper, safer, right? And the quality of life maybe is better. Does it answer your question?
It does. I'm also noticed that among some of my friends, they will learn Mandarin and they can't speak with their grandparents.
Yes, yeah, maybe their grandparents, the early immigrants would speak Cantonese. Yeah, that's a problem. But the younger generation, as long as you're educated, people can all speak Mandarin. The older generation, probably the illiterature, maybe they have spoken language, but they couldn't read, so that there's this communication gap. But in addition to the dialect, actually, difference between English and their local dialects. Most American-born speak English, even they were forced, either voluntarily or many of them are forced by their parents to go to the weekend language school, Chinese language school.
I actually had a question about that then, because there are so many dialects of Chinese, and you had mentioned those language schools being a very important part of the cultural communities. What are the languages, or are they essentially teaching us standard Chinese to these American-born children?
Yes, in those Chinese language school, they teach Mandarin, which is a standard language in China. Even the school operated by Taiwanese who came earlier, right? And also they run their language school also earlier. They also switched, even Taiwan also. I think in the early 2000s, I know that Taiwan also adopted this Hanyu pinyin, which is a phonetic symbol invented by mainland Chinese government in 1950s. But Taiwan also adopted that. Right? So they overwhelmingly nowadays, the Chinese language schools teach Chinese, simplifying the Chinese language, and Hanyu pinyin, which is based on this Mandarin, Chinese Beijing dialect based.
So given that they're teaching perhaps a language that even their grandparents don't actually speak, what is the idea just to keep that part of their culture alive, or is it because they want their children to be able to maintain connections to mainland China or Taiwan? Like, what's the rationale behind that then?
Yeah, it's a good question. There is a variety of the reasons. Okay, some are maybe emotional or cultural, but some are practical. Emotionally, the immigrant parents, no matter how, like here I said earlier, 80% of them are professionals, right? Actually, their English speaking ability is very fluent, and the proficiency level is very high. So they perfectly acculturated into mainstream society during the work time. But at home, they still probably feel more comfortable, conversing in Chinese with their friends during the weekend. So that's part of the reason there's a need for this language school. But the more important, just like you said, they want their children to maintain the Chinese heritage, and they could communicate with their grandparent generation. Some also, in the recent years, or in recent decades, because China is rising, the economic development in China is really fast. Right now, the two countries, US and China, competing, for the dominant power. So people see that there's tremendous economic opportunities there in China. Not only Chinese, even a lot of American parents send their children to the Chinese language school for that practical reason. And I sense a lot of the Chinese parents also hope give their children another tool, right, in their toolbox, to have that skill set in case, because a lot of business are multinational, international, right, multinational, they might be able to speak Chinese, so that gave them broader, work opportunities.
So when you were showing us that map, you pointed out that the Chinese community was like right next to the Black community. So I guess I was wondering, like, in your research, did you find like stuff about like the interactions between the Chinese community and like the Black communities in St. Louis and how those two?
Yes, I found some, not much, okay, but examples, for example, Chinese loaned to African Americans in the community because they were denied by the American Financial Association, right? So the Chinese will provide a loan to them. And also there are some Chinese drug stores, they were run in the Chestnut community area. And also a lot of the Chinese laundrymen hired, their workers. Some of them were African American women. And the restaurant, especially the Chinese, this delivery, this topsy-turvy, this kind of a fast food delivery. Oftentimes they were operated in African American neighborhood because the rental is cheaper there. So we see a lot of inter-ethnic happening.
I have actually another question. This is so fascinating for me. One of the things that you had mentioned as well as sort of the post 1965 was the movement of many ethnic Chinese, but maybe from Southeast Asia or different parts of China. Has that impacted how the Asian American Heartland story is evolving? Or do you still see a very similar kind of percentage that, huge 25% of all Asian Americans still have a Chinese background versus, say, a Laotian or Vietnamese or whatever?
Yes, we see that, the Asian American community is more and more diverse in recent decades. People counted as in the Asian community itself, there are as many as 26 ethnicities, or even maybe more. And then, for example, in St. Louis, we also see the large Vietnamese community since the 1970s. And many of them initially in the south part of the city, in the Greville. Any of you from St. Louis? You know that, right? Yeah, Greville, that area. Then they are supported by there's institutions called international institution that aided all these refugees from anywhere. So a lot of these Vietnamese refugees initially they were aided, but pretty soon they settled in and they moved out of that area, moved to North County or West counties, mingled with other Asian American communities. We do see that. Okay, so this picture pretty nationwide, okay, as well as in our local area. Did I answer your question? You have a very broad question. I don't remember.
Yeah, I know. Because like I say, I know so little, and yet it is absolutely fascinating to me. With these, obviously, again, the laundry sort of has changed, but do we see the same kinds of economic pillars holding up more recent immigrant groups until they have become second or third generation? So, Vietnamese restaurants are everywhere.
It's still very significant. Again, in St. Louis, there are about at least 300. Some statistics says 500, but at least between 300 to 500 restaurants in St. Louis. So you can see that is still a significant sector of their economy. Right. But of course, they are more diverse now. And not only restaurant force, but also a lot of professionals. Michael, I'll come back to you. Steve.
In my research into ethnic enclaves, one of the issues was that they tended to speak all the same language initially when they came over, so they form a community. And as the generation that was born here learned English, there were two issues. One was that oftentimes the parents did not want them to speak Chinese. They insisted that they learn English so that they could then participate more. And as a result of that, many of the first generation, the transition generation, oftentimes did not know where they belonged ethnically and culturally. Is that something that is still part of the problem?
Yeah, it's so-called, there's terms scholars call it the second generation dilemma. Because first generation, even they are not well assimilated, but at least they know their identity, right? They knew they're from China or whatever. Right? But the second generation, they were born in this country, they were educated in public schools. But at home, their parents insist on them speaking their ancestral dialect or language. So they're very confused, totally confused, and they're not sure what they are. In public, they want to be American, 100% American, but this conflict from home or pressure from home provided a challenge. And this is a common psychological behavior among the American-born generation. It was so in 1950s. From 1920 onward, Asian Americans began to have their second generation. That's second generation first emerged. But still, this psychological conflict is present in our generation, even now. We interviewed a lot of American-born high school, college students, and then they felt, that there's a conflict, or sometimes they feel the resentment towards their cultural heritage. Because, this mainstream and larger society has a greater force, right? Yeah, to attract them to want to be assimilated into. But along with the recent years, the China's rise, I think more people have large incentive to learn Chinese for practical reasons, or as well as psychological. Steve, yeah.
Just going back a little bit, I know in California, West Coast, all up and down the West Coast, Chinatown, Portland, Chinatown, Seattle, and so on and so on. Those people came mostly in the late 1840s, 1850s. People that were coming because it was gold, and that's what they were trying to do, to become wealthy by finding gold. If they were fortunate enough to go out and prospect and find anything, they would be run off by the white miners. And that's why they had to go to do other things in those towns. And were like in San Francisco, Chinatown was completely ghettoed, and they weren't given access to police, courts, anything like that. They had to provide their own. Okay, I understand all that history on there because that's where I'm from. Why? Those people were not professionals. You're saying that people that settled here were professionals. Why did they come here? What were they seeking?
The professionals, they might feel, what do I was talking about, the more recent, okay, since 1965.
Oh, okay.
The people who are in the Midwest were more likely to be professionals because better job opportunity. That's number one. Many of them came here and said, "It's for job."
But before that,
before that, also the population is similar to East Coast or West Coast. Majority of them are working. They came here, yeah.
Why did they come here?
They came here. Large force is anti-Chinese sentiment on the West Coast. They were forced to some distance. Chinese must go. There are many cases of Chinese are physically abused.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in the mining area. A woman, their hair was pulled because very few of them, but they were vulnerable. They had these bound feet. So there are cases of that. So the reason for them move from West Coast mainly is unwelcoming, unfriendly. Yeah, largely.
They started on the coast.
Yeah, they came here. Less, yes, yeah. That's why they said I interviewed the first Chinese in Chicago. That's the Moy Brothers, and they said, "Oh, here are friendly. They don't think we're decent." So here, yeah, the hostile environment that they experience on West Coast, not so present. And people more friendly and cheaper, property here is cheaper. In the present time, it's more so. Like the housing in the Silicon Valley is 10 times more expensive than here in Midway, or in country.
See.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, so I apologize, I don't know what happened because the bookstore manager, we have.
I think they owe you an apology, not that you owe us an apology. Yeah, the bookstore was meant to be here.
Yeah,
The books.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, but you know,
I apologize to you for that.
sorry, yeah, it's all right for me, but I can send you guys, you know, I'm sure if you can access me by email or any other social media. I can send you the 30% author discount of the new book. Okay. You can get that discount price as long as the free mailing in US by the press, which is the Rutgers University Press. Okay. I'll post that online. And I brought some free copies. You know, initially I was saying, whoever purchases the new book can get a free book. But you know, I'm open. Even you're free to first come, first serve. Okay, I will give away all copies I brought. Voice of China, that's English. Okay, if you come fast, you can grab that. The Chinese, since you are inspired the Chinese speaker, some of you, this will be good. Incentive for you, okay? If you want to have a copy, and it is really encyclopedia. It is encyclopedia of Asian American history and culture. Very broad, very useful. And this one is Chinese in Chicago, translation of Chicago Chinese. So I'm really thankful for you making time coming here. Nowadays, I know it's not easy to get audience in any kind of classroom. All right. You can hang out, you know, if you don't have time. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.